Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into today's Author Talk series brought to you by the Library Speakers Consortium. The Library Speakers Consortium is a partnership of more than 500 library systems across the US, Canada, and New Zealand with the goal of making Author Talks more accessible to communities of all sizes. I am Brandon Adler, your host and moderator in conversation with each of the acclaimed authors and presenters that you will hear from throughout our series. Today, we are so excited to have author Liann Zhang with us to talk about her debut novel, Julie Chan is Dead. Hi, Liann.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thanks for being here. I know that we have a lot of people excited to get started, me being included. But before we begin, I do need to give that kind of standard housekeeping information that keeps everything running smoothly. We have compiled some questions that were pre-submitted with registration, but you can always submit those questions during the live event by clicking the questions button that's just below this live stream video. If you're already in full screen view, you might need to hit escape so that you can see what I'm talking about with the tabs underneath the live stream video. Keep in mind there are a lot of you tuning in today, so we'll get to as many questions as time allows. Now to formally introduce our guest for today. Liann Zhang is a second-generation Chinese-Canadian who splits her time between Vancouver, British Columbia, and Toronto, Ontario. After a short stint as a skincare content creator, she graduated from the University of Toronto with a degree in psychology and criminology. Julie Chan is Dead is her first novel. So I can already tell you, Liann, that we have tons of questions about psychology and criminology and your background in that. But before we begin, I want to touch base with you. Your book dropped 2 weeks ago, almost to the day, right?
Yeah. On Tuesday. Absolutely. It's been crazy. I was just in Toronto a week ago and now I'm in Vancouver. So very fitting. That's my biography. So it's been a roller coaster. I'm so thankful for everybody that's read the book and has sent me a nice message. It's literally the best thing ever. So
congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So to kick us off then, do you want to please give us a summary of your new book, Julie Chan is Dead?
Of course. Yeah, so Julie Chan is Dead follows Julie Chan, a supermarket cashier with nothing to lose, who finds herself thrust into the glamorous yet perilous world of her late twin sister, Chloe, a popular influencer. Separated at a young age, the identical twins were polar opposites and rarely spoke, except for one viral video that Chloe initiated. Finding my long-lost twin sister and buying her a house, #emotional. When Julie discovers Chloe's lifeless body under mysterious circumstances, she seizes the chance to live the life she's always envied. Transforming into Chloe is easier than expected. Julie effortlessly adopts Chloe's luxurious influencer lifestyle, complete with designer clothes, a meticulous skincare routine, and millions of adoring followers. However, Julie soon realizes that Chloe's seemingly picture-perfect life was anything but. Haunted by Chloe's untimely death and struggling to fit into the privileged influencer circle, Julie faces mounting challenges during a week-long island retreat with Chloe's exclusive group of influencer friends. As events spiral out of control, Julie uncovers the sinister forces that may have led to her sister's demise and realizes she might be the next target.
Oh, yeah. So thrilling. The book is just based on the summary that you just read. It really does. It takes a turn. It's a little bit mystery, a little bit thriller, a little bit horror even. Is that what you were always going for? Or did you set out for it to be a specific thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where I didn't really have a specific genre that I was slotting it in. I just had this story and this absolutely chaotic this plot that I wanted to tell, and it kind of just morphed into what it was. The thriller and horror part is something that I kind of later chose after rereading it and being like, okay, what is this supposed to be? And how can I possibly pitch this to an agent? That's when the thriller stuff came up. But yeah, a lot of people have been saying it's also horror. There's a lot of different reads on it, but overall, yeah, there's just a lot of aspects of everything.
So Josie from Blue Earth County Library is asking, was there anything in particular that inspired you to write the book? So you said you started with like the plot and everything, but what was the inspiration for that?
Yeah, I've been wanting to write about influencers for like a long, long time. As you mentioned, I was briefly like a skincare influencer. So back when I was in high school, I had awful cystic acne. So I started reviewing skincare product on Instagram and I kind of built a following that way. And with that time, I was kind of able to ingratiate myself in the system and get the behind the scenes of everything. And particularly getting to know other influencers, even though we were small compared to who's featured in the book, because they're like multiple millions, it was interesting to see how they performed online and how they platformed themselves versus how they were, a button away in a group chat where they might act differently and feel like an entirely different person.
Mhm.
Just that dynamic in itself, I was really eager to explore. And then once I figured out the perfect plot to put everything in, Julie Chen is Dead became the book. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was like I said, we have a lot of questions about process. And with this book, you had the plot came together. Did you know any characters first, other than the fact that they would be influencers? Did you know, were they flushed out when you started writing the plot or organizing the plot?
So Julie and Bella Marie, which are kind of like the two, topper, like the main characters, I would say they did come pretty soon because they're kind of the basis of the story. As for the other influencers, they were definitely just me choosing kind of archetypes of different influencers you see out there, like the beauty ones, beauty influencer, sport influencer, the one that's just really beautiful, the mommy influencer. Actually meets these different people. I want to like kind of fill in every area, make it kind of diverse in their niches, although as people, they're not necessarily diverse that way.
Yeah.
But those type of characters came as I was writing and as I needed to fill them in. Yeah.
Hmm. Megan says, can you describe your writing process slash daily schedule? How do you get yourself in the zone?
Yeah. So I'm very thankful I did get to quit my full-time job with my book deal. So this is like my full-time thing now. Typically what I do is on a writing day, which is I do try to do it every day. I have it segmented in my calendar where I'm like sitting down at my laptop, forcing myself to sit at my desk. Whether actual writing, productive writing gets done is another issue because sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm trying really hard, but I'm just staring at a blank document for a while. But the important part for me is like actually getting myself there because if I never sit at my desk, I don't write at all. Um, and eventually I find myself like often like cruising online and finding different things and I'll start to feel this sick feeling where I'm like, okay, I need to get something done and I'll force the typing to start. And I find that every time after I actually get past the starting point, it gets easier because I actually really do enjoy writing. And then I sometimes get absorbed into a flow and the words just come out of me. But it's definitely the starting point. That's definitely the hardest part, which is why I force myself to sit down at my desk to get started.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just making yourself be in the place where the writing can happen, even if
Yeah.
you're not writing.
Yeah. But sometimes it's like it'll come out of nowhere. Like I'm in bed and I can think of an idea at like 12 and then I'm just writing until 3 a.m. So I also, when those moments happen, I need to capture it. But I would say most of my writing comes at the desk. Yeah.
Wayne wants to know how long it took you to complete this novel.
This novel is one of like my I have no idea what happened with this novel because unlike my other books that take like months and months or like years to write, this one I wrote in like under 2 months, which is
Wow,
not
that's
not usual for me. So I will say this one was like an anomaly, but I think it was also my first book that I wrote in this specific voice, which is very modern. It feels more akin to me. I used to write a lot of historical fiction, which is like past tense, more serious. I usually wrote in the third person, so it's a bit more distant. But with this character and Julie, I borrowed a lot of myself in the book, um, which made it a little bit easier to write, I would say. I think the plot itself is so chaotic and so crazy and fun that I was just eager to write more and like stay up later to write more. So I think that was part of it too.
well, that's how it felt to read the book too. Like not necessarily chaotic, but so fun. The pacing was so kind of intense that
Mhm.
you couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
Especially like the chapters are shorter, which it really kind of draws you in and makes you
Mhm.
want to keep rushing ahead. Was that your intention when you were writing? Were you thinking about the pacing of everything?
Interestingly, it wasn't something that I really thought about. Every time I ended a scene, I just wanted to end it at, like, almost a little bit of a cliffhanger, and I found there were, like, natural parts in every scene that kind of broke off that way. But when I am writing, I use, Scrivener, so it counts, like, the word count on every scene when you break it up, and personally, when I find it going beyond a certain number, I start to feel like, "Okay, this is too long," and I will, like, actively try to find ways to, like, break it up so the chapters feel a bit shorter. I think it's also my personal reading preference. I love short chapters, so that's why I write short chapters, yeah.
Yeah. Great choice. Okay, so you mentioned that you have written some historical fiction, but
Mhm.
Nancy from Monmouth County Library says, tell us about embracing your dark side when writing this novel. We all have one, we just rarely express it.
That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, I even in my historical fiction, I found always went kind of dark, but I would just write about real life dark situations. Like I wrote one about the Ming Dynasty, and it was about an emperor that was like very psychotic, and it was about like a concubine that was under him. So things went dark that way too. So I feel like it was always in me, but now I've just placed it in the perfect genre. Like I found the genre where I'm supposed to be at, you know? So it's a way I'm able to express it to the maximum, I think, so it's
Mhm.
fun, yeah.
Are you going to pick up any of those things that you've written before that maybe weren't published and kind of and revive them and maybe try to work them into a thriller or mystery or horror historical fiction wise?
I really want to, because 'cause they're, like, just there, you know? I feel like a lot I tend to be an ideas person, so I write a lot of good ideas, and then sometimes it just, like, fizzles out
Mhm.
slowly, but now that I have a better grasp of how to write an actual story and the craft of it all, I feel like it would be fun to reapproach things, especially there are, like, specific stories that I know are gonna be so interesting if I just am able to find, like, a really good twist, but it's always that part that's the hardest, you know? So, I hope to revisit them soon, but at this point, no promises, yeah.
That makes sense. Karishma from Oakville Public Library is asking, when writing dark comedy, where do you draw the line, or do you simply write without one?
That is interesting. I feel like for this book, for those who have read it, I think you'll see that there's, like I the line, if there is any, is, like like, all the way down in hell, like, the line I'm really pushing it. I think I'm really pushing it, and the people who love to be pushed in that way will enjoy it. Um, but I think personally, as someone that grew up online and has had way too much unsupervised internet access as a young child and has seen everything, I think my personal barometer of what's too dark is maybe a little bit skewed. So, I think I work on a personal level. So what's dark for me might not might be, like, very, very, very dark for other people. Um, but I feel like I just write whatever comes up and what I'm comfortable with, so I'm never really thinking like, "Oh, is this too much?" I mean, I think I just haven't written anything where I'm really like, "Oh, wow, hold back," like, will people really hate that? I think I'm just like, the people who get it will get it, hopefully, is how I approach these things, so, yeah, good question. I feel like there's no line for me just yet, but maybe one day I'll really step on it.
You've not scared yourself yet.
No, yeah. I'm working my way up, yeah.
So Angela is asking, did you find that the characters came easily, or did you have to work really hard to flesh out their different personalities?
So for the main characters that get more of a focus, they did come more easily to me. Like I said, Julie particularly, I did borrow a lot of parts of myself, just like in identity alone. Like I'm a Canadian, but she's like Chinese American. She's, in her mid 20s. She's always online. Those are three things that are me. So in that way, it was easy to write about her because she's very similar to who I am. The other characters like Bella Marie and Iz, they're also like stronger characters. So, and they took like more light. So that was easier to write those people. For some of the other influencers that exist in the group, it was interesting writing experience because part of it, the point was to have them kind of blend together at points. Like it was very intentional, not just in the way where, Julie's developing these relationships, but at times it feels superficial. In that way, it was important, but also for like what happens later in the book, they do kind of need to become like this blend of people. But at the same time, you do want to be able to know them. So part of it was me finding these like archetypes, as I mentioned. So like everybody knows the fitness influencer, so they can like maybe hopefully project someone onto that, or like the mommy influencer. Like having those specific things I think helps set them apart. But it was definitely, for the other characters, it did not come naturally. It was something that me and my editors worked a lot on throughout our edits. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. How you were just talking about the influencer archetypes, it makes me think of Luke's question, which is you touch upon the question of authenticity quite a lot. And what do you think? What is your idea of authentic, especially since you're writing from this lens of influencers, and you really get to this question of authenticity versus reality, even.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this is one of those things that everyone's really like, as people these days, because we spend so much time online. Like online used to be an escape from real life, but now we're like going into real life to escape online because we all are on there. um the question of authenticity is very prevalent, and I think there's a lot of different existences on the internet that could lend to more authenticity. Like if they're just there for entertainment or to teach you something, it's different. But for influencers specifically, where their sole motive and their only job is to literally sell you something and literally to like convince you to do something, they're, from what I feel and what I perceive, they're always picking and choosing how they display themselves to people. And even the people who, are putting on an authentic image, they're still actively picking up pieces of themselves and choosing to display that certain amount of authenticness of them. So I think it is possible for people to be true to themselves, but like it's one of those keywords that I feel like are almost useless on the online world, because like can you even really be authentic when you're only showing like 10% of yourself to the internet and you're always considering an audience? And when you're considering an audience, there's always a message and there's like always an underlying thing going on, right? So in that way, it's hard to be an authentic person, especially when you grow to be so big. There's so much expected of you from brands and other things. Like you can only act certain ways to continue that career. And on social platforms, you know, I've learned a new term, which is techno feudalism, and I'm obsessed with it because
Oh,
it's true. Like we're in a new feudalistic society, but it's all online. Like these mega corporations like Meta and Google, they control everything, but we're just like little workers, like trying to till our own land while they collect all our money. Like these giant corporations are not interested in authenticity. They just want to keep platforming the people that will create more clicks and more retention. And that doesn't mean it's the honest people. And I find oftentimes we look online, who's the biggest? It's usually not the most honest and best authentic people. So personally, these days I treat influencers like reality TV stars, is what I'm saying. They're fun
okay.
to watch, they're really pretty, they're entertaining, but I don't even think about authenticity anymore. If they're recommending a product, I'll think about it and then do my own research after, is how I approach things. Yeah.
It's really important that's one of the through threads of the book
Mm-hmm.
is this thought of authenticity in a social media landscape, um, especially with the potential psychological deficits as kids are growing up that can take
Mm-hmm.
place. Kind of the whole, you wrap your mind around, if I don't post it, does it really happen, which you really get to in the book.
Exactly. And especially, I'm not envious of kids these days because they're also growing up in AI media. And like some people, I'm always, I've heard of like, like Facebook trying to do like AI influencers these days. And sometimes I feel like these kids will not be able to tell the difference. And at that point, it's like authenticity is totally out the window. Like it's not even, a thing. And I know there are YouTubers that are completely AI now and they have like millions of followers. It's an industry that they're trying to build. So it's a scary, scary time.
It is.
Yeah.
Um, so even with that, the social commentary that you have in the book on mental health, and other contemporary commentary like law enforcement and things like that, Claudia is saying throughout the novel you call out these systems that are riddled with problems, like police and issues with mental health and the judiciary. Excuse me. Why was it important for you to write about this?
I think it was very important at the time and forever because it's something that affects everybody. But particularly when I was writing this book, I was still, you know, under the mindset that like I didn't know if I was actually going to be an author or not. So I was fully pursuing I wanted to be a counselor at first, which is
Okay.
why I studied psychology. So while I was writing this book, I was actually a part of um, the Canadian like suicide crisis line. So a lot of these topics were things that I was encountering in real time, like constantly. So it was something that was just on my mind all the time. And I felt, especially for a character like Julie, where she really starts out at the bottom, it was important to address a lot of these issues because it's what a lot of people these days feel. And especially I found interacting with these users on the crisis line, a lot of them feel like a lack of connection, a lot of lack of friendship, a lack of meaningful people around them. And that's something Julie feels. And it's something that she eventually replaces with social media and her fan base or Chloe's fan base.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a very natural thing to come up, especially because it's something that I studied and was in, for the duration of writing the novel. Yeah.
Yeah. We Henry said, you said that Julie Chan is based on you. Are any of the other characters in the novel similar to people in your real life? And would they recognize themselves?
I mean, these are all like mega famous influencers. So all the influencers that I knew, some of them have grown to be really big. But I don't think they'll be looking at them being like, that's me. But in terms of inspiration, like legally, no, I always say legally, this is all fiction. Nothing is real. But I think if you're someone that's online a lot, you'll be able to pick out references, is all I'll say. Yeah.
I definitely had some thoughts in my mind while reading.
Yeah.
Kimberly from Chester County Library is saying, what is your favorite characteristic of Julie Chan?
Ooh, I just love that she's unafraid in her head. She never says it out loud because she is afraid of how she's being perceived, but it's so fun writing her and reading her because she's very unapologetic with how she expresses all of her grievances. And she, not to toot my own horn too much, but I feel like I wrote it in a very witty, fun way where like even if she's
You
saying
did.
something audacious and silly, you're kind of like, I get it. Like, it's because it's funny and you get it. You're on the same page with her. So even when she's doing awful things like stealing her sister's identity, you're kind of like, okay, I see you and I understand where you're coming from. So yeah, I just loved all those gritty, fun, silly little bits about her.
Mm-hmm. Great. We have a lot of people asking about your personal experiences and background, and how those helped you write the book. Mudia from Montgomery Public Library is saying, what personal experience or background do you feel might have helped or hurt while writing this novel? And likewise, Caitlin wants to know if you felt like your psychology background helped with writing, which I imagine it probably did a lot.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I wasn't fully aware that it was helping me while I was writing the book. It was when people started to ask these questions that I started to realize, like, oh, yeah, I literally took lectures, like a whole class, a year-long class on cults and conformity, which is something that comes up in this book, especially like conformity on social media and within like certain groups. So all that came up. And I always like to talk about this experiment that we learned about in psychology class called like the Ash conformity experiments. They basically had a bunch of university level students come into a lab and have them judge lengths of sticks. And it's like a very obvious task where like a child could do it. And without any influence, like people answered almost 100% of the time. but they found that if there was like 7 or more compatriots that answered the wrong answer, even though the answer is so obvious, like one stick is way longer than the other, they found like a staggering significant amount of people would answer wrong just to be with the group, even though they're like literally looking at something that's really obviously one's longer and shorter than the other. And there's like a famous quote from the researcher who is like, even well-intentioned smart people can convince themselves that black is white in order to fit in. And I remember like reading that again and being like, that's literally what Julie does. And I feel like inherently I was kind of inspired by that moment, because you do find that as she gets deeper into the social media machine, she kind of sheds parts of herself in order to kind of fit in with the people she wants to be a part of. Um, so in that way, I think a lot of it came out. And also like, I studied criminology, but a lot of it was sociology. There's like a lot of intersectionality topics there, like lots of race and class topics that come up. So thankfully my university degree did not go to waste and I am using it in some way for this novel. Yeah.
Some very obvious ways too, but probably
Mhm.
something that you didn't realize yet.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned, looking at things from a sociological perspective as it pertains to race and class, and this book examines kind of those exact things, the haves and the have-nots, and the power of money and privilege. Maria wants to know, why did that interest you? What messages are you trying to send with your story?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't write a social media influencer story without getting into those topics because when I was in it, I felt it very acutely. And I
Interesting.
say this, I'm in a position of privilege. Like the fact that I was able to start, a skincare blog meant that I owned product. Like I had, my money, like well, I was a teenager, so my parents would buy me a skincare product, which is already like very a privileged thing to have. Um, and I just remember being in these rooms and in these group chats and seeing certain people have like this almost obliviousness of how much they have and how much privilege they have, and they keep wanting more and feel this expectation from brands that they deserve these free items because they post a picture, and they get like offended when they don't. And then I would like look at their feeds and see all they own already, and it made me feel a little bit ill, to be honest, because it was just so much privilege reeking out of them. So when I came to writing this book, like I felt like I couldn't do an accurate portrayal of what the industry is like without addressing these topics, especially because with something like social media that's technically so easily accessible, like all you need is a phone and an internet connection. There's like this sense of like false autonomy in it all when really all of the other external factors, like how much money you have, how often you work, like what opportunity you have access to, that all impacts how successful you can become on social media. Of course, there are outliers like in every industry, but social media is not an exception to all the traditional ways that people can be oppressed. And, you know, I think it was something that was very important to highlight when I was writing the book.
Mhm. Absolutely. I wonder if how you started feeling toward the end of your own influencer career is what made it interesting, or to go into psychology and criminology. Like, were you interested in studying that because of your experience with social media and influencing?
I do wonder, I feel like those types of thoughts didn't come after.
Yeah.
This was like probably I think I stopped like before COVID. So I was like maybe a year or two into my university life. I think when I was in high school and a teenager, I fully loved getting free things and I was so for it. Part of me was like, "Oh my god, it's Christmas every day. Like I'm getting products. It's amazing." Like sometimes they're paying me like way too much money for a dumb photo. Like it felt like such a novelty and so much fun. So I feel like I fully wasn't cognizant of that
Yeah.
when I was at that point where I was like choosing what to do for university. I think I kind of fell into psychology because I've always been interested in like how humans think and how they behave, and also just know some people in my personal life that's like very affected by mental health issues, and I felt like a passion in that at the time. So that was like the primary reason I went into that. But you know, the world works in mysterious ways. Everything has connected somehow at the end of the day. So yeah.
So another theme that you touch upon in this book, Craig is pointing out, saying you explore all layers of family in this book: biological, adoptive, chosen or found, family included. Even through the lens of social media, which is absolutely fascinating. Was this intentional, or did this develop as the story went on and your writing progressed?
So aspects of it were certainly intentional. Like, you know, at the start, Julie kind of has remained the same character throughout all the edits. So she's always been someone that did not have a good family. And like, even when I was first brainstorming it, I was gonna have her not have any family at all. Like, every parent is dead, you know, she has nothing. But we now have the aunt character that's arguably, you know, even worse that she's alive. But so, and then with her, so much of her desires is finding connection and finding love and acceptance. And that is something that social media can sometimes offer. And I think a lot of people, especially my age, have found community online. Luckily, we're not, you know, Julie, and we're not like throwing ourselves into the deep end of social media space where everyone's a little bit superficial and crazy. But I did want to emphasize that sometimes there are real communities that can be found. And I know lots of people who love their online, like only online friends. So that was something I wanted to get across, especially when she finds this feeling of acceptance, not only in her fan base, but in the other influencers that she meets. She thinks it's like everything that she's wanted, you know, and she doesn't fully realize that the people that she's interacting with might be more shallow than it seems. But in terms of like the adoption, that was for two reasons. I love exploring like nature versus nurture, because you start off like not necessarily a blank slate, but they're kind of the same person, but you see them have different trajectories. And I like, you know, it plays into that sociological intersectionality aspect where you get to see how two people in different environments become different people, because one was allowed to thrive and the other was like had nothing. And another part of it was more like for entertainment reasons, where you get to watch Julie thrown into the middle of this influencer world with zero preparation because she just takes over a life. So that was the other reason for having the adoption. But yeah, I think it's so interesting setting it in an online world, because you're right that I can explore lots of different meanings of family within one story. Yeah, I didn't really think about that but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, I did do that. So that was fun. Yeah.
That's perfect. So speaking of nurture versus nature, Kayla from Texas Women's University Libraries is saying, as a twin myself, I'd love to know why you chose to write twins as your main characters. Was it for that exploration, or what was your thought process behind that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, it's kind of for both. So I did want to do the nature versus nurture, because so much of the themes of this book is rooted in like class and race, and you know, and a lot of that has to do with what environment you grow up in. So it was partially that, and also partially, as I mentioned, just for story wise, it made the most sense. I didn't want to do like a slow buildup of the main character, like slowly gaining fame and, you know, working her way up through like months. Because it is a thriller, I wanted things to be like fast, fast, fast. So I needed a way where she's thrown into things kind of slightly unprepared, and really seeing everything at the same time along with the reader. So having a identity swap situation was kind of like a perfect way to do that too.
Yeah. Did you study twins and the psychology of twins at all?
We did. Well, not specifically in a class, but a lot of classes do have like twins as like one of like the lectures that they do. You know, there are famous, very awful experiments where they did separate triplets and twins and put them into different families and see how they grow up, which is, you know, so awful and so unethical. But there is in the psychology world like a huge fascination with nature versus nurture, and sometimes they really want to choose one or the other when in reality it's kind of both. But yeah, I think it's one of those things that because I studied it so much, it kind of just naturally came up, so it was helpful. Yeah.
sense. Nick Hunj from Groton Public Library is saying, how do you feel social media has changed Asian American perceptions within the community versus outside the community?
This is a fascinating question because this is so funny to me. Since I, as an Asian, I'm Canadian, but I, grew up in the internet space, which doesn't really necessarily have borders. Um, I remember when I was coming up, Asian YouTubers were like the top YouTubers. You had like Ryan Higa, like Kev Jumba, like all these people that were looked like me. And that was my main form of consumption, like in terms of media. Like I would watch more YouTube than I would watch movies. So I never felt underrepresented in media when I was that age because I kept seeing myself online. Of course, if I, turned on the TV or watched a movie, I would notice a discrepancy there. But because so much of my life was rooted online and specifically in these communities where I saw myself, I didn't have that feeling of othering. Also, I did grow up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and if anyone's there, you'll know it's very multicultural. There were schools I was in. I was moved to a lot of schools as a child, but there were some schools where I was like, mostly Asians or like mostly people of color, and the white people were actually the minority. So it was interesting that way. But I think as a whole, it has created more opportunities for connection within Asians, especially I remember like a few years ago on Facebook, there's like this huge Facebook group called like Subtle Asian Traits, where it was just like a bunch of Asian people and everyone was like talking online, like connecting with people. People were like dating people from that group. It was like a whole thing.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a way of meaningful connection and a way of like seeing other people that look just like you and connecting it maybe in a way that other like, there's so much talk of dysphoria. No, that's not how you say it. Diaspora. There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
But it's a way for us to connect to each other. So I think it is very important there. But I feel like it has to be a positive space because, well, it can also border on fetishization because now with the rise of K-pop being so popular and online in media, it's become a whole other thing. But I think any exposure is good exposure at this point.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. Jessica is saying there were many times in the book that I had a hard time with Julie, but also understood her need for belonging and addiction to the lifestyle. Even when I was mad at her, I loved her, and her transition felt so natural. Were there times you felt conflicted in how you wrote her choices or thoughts, or did she really just flow freely?
I mean, there were moments where I was conflicted in the way where I was like, I did like wonder, like I was very sure of, I knew the ending at the beginning of when I was writing it. So I was very certain of how her character would become what she becomes. There were definitely questions internally of like, okay, how would people receive this? Like, I know I would love it, which is why I wrote it. But there was always the question of how would other people receive it? But her character arc for me was supposed to reflect the type of influencer you might see if you grew up online, where you feel connected to her at the beginning because she feels more like you. She's like an everyday girl. She's just a little jealous of things. Like she just wants certain things. And you see these influencers that feel like you, but then they like grow bigger and they move to Los Angeles or to LA and they start to become like a different person because they're just shedding the parts of themselves that you identified with to fit into like an influencer crowd. And before you know it, like this influencer that you used to love has completely disappeared. That was kind of like the character arc that I wanted Julie to go on, but like on a extreme level where she does like crazy choices to get to that point. So there was a moment where it's like you might feel a little bit more detached to her, but to me that was always intentional because that's what I wanted to happen, because you are supposed to be like, is this the right thing? But she does it anyways because I mean, how often do we see influencers on the news doing awful things and then continue to do awful things because so many of them never really get the proper repercussions? That was kind of what it's supposed to be. So even though I felt like sometimes readers might be conflicted about it, I felt like that was how it had to go when I was writing it. Yeah.
Patricia is really curious about the soundtrack that was playing in your head. Patricia from Phoenix Public Library says, do Did you listen to music while you were writing this? And if so, what does that soundtrack sound like?
Yes, I did. I mean, a lot of the sounds were classical music sounds that did come up and were named in the novel. Oh gosh, well, you had the Lacrimosa and Swan Lake and all those like kind of grittier, darker classical sounds that, especially during one scene, I don't know if I technically it's like in near the beginning, but she does go to dinner and the music is literally
Yeah,
playing in
yeah.
her ear. Um, I was literally playing all those sounds while I was writing it, and it was, like, so immersive, like, I was really carried away with those scenes because I was just, like, focused in, and it felt like I was there, um, and I just love those type of I can't really write when there's words, the songs have words and lyrics in them because I get distracted by the words, so lots of classical music, specifically those, like, deathly feeling, like, haunting like you're in a movie and you're being hunted down or like something
Mhm.
bad's gonna happen type of music was playing. Yeah.
So we have a lot of questions about kind of the editing process. Jeff says you mentioned that you wrote it in 2 months. I'm guessing that was the first draft. How did you get from there to the final published draft, and how long did that take? What was the editing process like?
Yeah. The 2 months was the first draft. By the end of it, again, this was an anomaly novel. Normally I find once I'm finished the first draft, which usually takes months and months, I hate it. And I'm like, I need to redo the whole thing. But for this one, I finished it and I was like, oh, why does this feel like okay? Like I was like, maybe there's something here. So I didn't rewrite it like I normally would. I did like a really fast edit and then I sent it out to beta readers that I already had and like
Yeah.
critique partners. Um, and then that was the only period where I really left it alone. Most of them got back to me very quick, which I felt was a good sign because oftentimes it would take a bit longer to read, but some of them got back to me, like, within days, and just, like, that turnaround to me felt like, "Okay, these people were hooked onto the story, even the first draft of it, like, there's something there," and after I received all of the beta comments back from, like, my writer friends, I, like, applied the edits that made sense, did another round myself, and at a certain point, I felt pretty confident. In addition, I will say I don't know if people are aware, but there's a very amazing Reddit community on Reddit. I don't know if you guys know that social media platform. It's called Pub Tips, and you for people who are querying, you can submit your query to the community there. It's full of writers and like published writers and authors and like agents and stuff, and they can like workshop it with you. And I got so much amazing feedback from my query and my like first 300 words. And everyone was like, you should just send it. Like this is like so good. Then I felt very confident when I sent it. So it didn't go through as much revisions as I normally would put it through, but I think there were so many factors that was giving me confidence that I felt a little bit delusional about it, thankfully, because I mean, it worked out, but so
Here we are.
yeah. Mhm.
So you said querying or just submit it. So did you then submit it to an agent? Did you have to shop around for an agent, or did you go directly to publisher? What was that process like?
Yes, I did get an agent. When I'm writing these books, because I really wanted to be a published writer, even with my other books, I did query one other book that got no bites. But normally while I'm writing a book, I'll like on my free time, I'll research agents and I put them on a list. Um, I think there's a great website called Query Tracker. I think that's what it's called. You can like easily add them onto lists and like have them by genre. So I would do research on Query Tracker and like Publishers Marketplace and also just like look at my favorite thriller books or like horror books and like flip to the back of their acknowledgments or like look at the author, their
Mhm.
bio and the contact to see who they were represented by, and I would like put them all on a list. Um, and by the time that I was ready to query, I had the workshop query, the X amount of pages, whatever that they were asking for, and I just kind of sent them away. I think I trialed like the first batch was like maybe 10, 15 agents. And when I was already starting to get full requests, then again, I was very delusional with this book. Then I just sent out all of them, which I think I sent out maybe like 70
Oh,
queries.
wow.
So they were like basically cold emails that I was like, please, like, please, I wrote this book, like, please represent me. Thankfully it worked. So But yeah, I didn't have like any industry connections whatsoever. I literally just cold emailed people from their websites. So yeah.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
You just gave a lot of really excellent tips. So the Reddit pub tips,
Yes.
what you said, and
I
then
love it there.
character, and then acknowledgement section at the back of a book.
Hmm.
Right, those are great tips. Thank you. Okay, so we have quite a few people asking about the title. Julie Chan
Hmm.
is dead. Is that the title that you submitted, or was that changed?
It was changed. Interestingly enough, if people do go on pub tips, you can find my original title on there because it's still up there. It was original Follow Me, because it's about social media, it's about following you, and I felt like there's like a fun, especially it feels a bit sinister. When you say follow me, it's like, oh, where am I following you to? It feels a bit eerie. So at the time, I felt that was very good. When I did query it, I changed it to follow us because you know I wanted to focus more on like the group as a whole and like influencers as a whole instead of one person. It was that for a long, long time until the editors got to it and we were getting ready to publish it. They were kind of like, this title feels a bit generic. And I understood because, if you Googled follow us or follow me,
Mm.
you would get a million results that are not my book. And it's just not good that way. And interestingly enough, there was another book that came out recently that had a very similar plot to mine about influencers that was called Follow Us or Follow Me. So
Oh,
I wonder if they heard about this book and was like, okay, we can't do the same title. So they made me change it. But to be honest, I wouldn't have changed it unless they asked me to because I kind of like the first book. But now like Julie Chan is Dead is so distinct.
it's
And
very
if you,
distinct. Yes.
yeah, if you looked it up anywhere, it's the first thing that would pop up. And it does tell you a little bit about the book and it kind of grabs you in a way. So I am honestly glad they told me to change it. Um, but yeah, like the title process, I find I've learned not to get too attached to the titles because oftentimes publishers will ask you to change it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Somebody asked earlier, I have to scroll. I'm sorry, I'm not going to say your name
Okay.
because I can't find the question again, but they asked about the character names.
Hmm.
How did you choose your character names? Because some of them are pretty interesting.
Yes. So for Julie and Chloe, Julie just came very naturally to me. It felt like a very plain name, to be honest. Sometimes we would go on to like generate, like I would type in like name generator and then some of them have the options to put in like the year and then a gender and then like list it by the most common names. That's how I choose a lot of names. And for Chloe, I felt it was like it sounded kind of the same, even though it's not really the same, but it sounded kind of the same, but sounded a lot more luxurious.
Yeah.
It evokes the brand Chloe, which is a very high end brand, and it feels a little bit fancier than Julie, even though it kind of feels the same. So that was why those names are those. But for other character names, oftentimes I would just pull it out from like oftentimes from when I was working, would be like employee names. If I like their name, then I would just that's mine now, and I used it for a character. Um, and for last names that we're talking about, like not good people, I usually make it up by like combining different last names into one. So it's like a new name because I
Mhm.
don't want to like indict anyone's family with Um, so that was how I do it. I'm very bad at coming up with like actually original names. Like I could never write a fantasy novel where I have to come up with new things, but it's just mostly a name bank that I draw from. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's a great insight into the process of naming characters. Thank you.
Yeah.
Carrie from Lawrence Public Library saying, do you find times where you have to find positives to help avoid a depressive state from writing such challenging stories?
Mm,
Or
that's
how
so
do you take
interesting.
care of your own mental health?
I found for this one, again, an anomaly. I'm just going on about that, but it was so much fun to write for me. It was kind of cathartic because Julie says a lot of like things that I would not
Mhm.
necessarily say myself, but I had like little feelings about. And it was kind of relieving to get it out on paper. There are definitely moments that I think people would think are like really tough. But I don't know what that says about me and what's wrong with my brain, but I had so much fun writing those scenes. I think I just like to write about like weird things, so it always fits for me, but I like writing this type of stuff. It's why I could never a lot of my favorite novels are, like, literary fiction novels that make me sob tears,
Okay.
but those are the novels that I could never write because that would have to be, like, living in that emotional state for, like, years, editing and writing a process, so I usually avoid those things. Um, so for most of the time, with, like, a thriller that's, like, quick and punchy, luckily, I find that I generally enjoy it. Um, there are, of course, moments when I'm writing where, it feels more like a drag, it's, like, harder, it's, like, I'm not as inspired or whatever, but I find you just have to push through it, otherwise the writing will never get done, so, um, I just have to do the thing, and eventually, I think I love it so much that the process of writing when I get into a flow does kind of become the thing that I relax with. It used to be my hobby. Writing used to be my hobby, but now it's my job. Luckily, it's still my hobby. We'll see check back in 3 years when I'm, like, sick of it, and then maybe I'll have a different answer, but for now, it's like I still really
Probably
like
not.
it, yeah.
So we've talked a lot about other stories that you've written in the past and queried to agents, but we haven't
Mhm.
talked about your journey as a writer. So, like, what was the first
Yeah,
thing that you wrote, and like when you knew you wanted to be a published author?
yeah, so basically, I had a lot of oh my god, I'm so sorry, my mom is knocking on my door right now,
No, I don't
asking me
hear
for
it.
dinner.
It's probably
Um,
distracting.
yes, that's why I was like, I can't really. Um, I'm so sorry, can you repeat the question?
Just your journey as a writer. So, what was the first thing you ever wrote? What got you started writing and wanting to be a published writer?
Oh my gosh, my first ever story. I guess my first ever one technically was in the 5th grade. I co-wrote a horror story with my friend. So, I think the dark again, there was a question about, like, the dark stuff. I think it was always in me because my first ever story was in the 5th grade, and it was a horror story. Um, so that was the first ever book. I guess my first ever, like, official book as, like, an adult that was actually good, um, came, like, during COVID. It was one of those things where I love to read, but I never really thought about writing as a career or doing it more than just, like, casually, like, in an essay or writing a short story or something
Yeah.
until COVID hit and I had lots of time. Um, I'm trying to remember what my first story is. It's one of those things that will never come out of day because it's, like, so bad. It's a practice novel, but it must have been again, I think it must have been, like, literary fiction-y because that was, like I love to read that, and it was kind of sad. I think that was when I was like, "Okay, I can't write this stuff," because I tried to and I just got really depressed, and I had to put it down all the time, but it was about, like, an Asian family. It was a lot of vibes and no plot, which is why I'm having a hard time describing it because I didn't know how to write an actual
Yeah.
story with a pitchable plot. But it was one of those things where I just wanted to write and wanted to get the feelers out, and turns out I really enjoyed it. So once I learned how to actually um, learn like the act structures and the story structures and what goes into an actual story, that's when it became the actual book. But for the first ones, they were all just vibes, I will say. Yeah.
So, Esha from Cuyahoga County Public Library saying, what advice do you have for hopeful new authors hoping to break into a similar genre or any genre?
Yeah. I think it just is persistence, unfortunately. You just have to keep writing and you have to be I like to say you have to be a bit delusional about it. Like, you really have to believe it's gonna happen because 'cause you'll get kicked down so many times in the
Mhm.
process where you'll start to lose faith, but you just have to keep trying and, like, really believe there will be a future where you're published, and you're just working toward that. That's how I always told my friends, like, "I'm, like, being delusional about this, like, it's no way it's gonna happen, but I need to be delusional." So that helped me a lot because if I didn't believe in myself to do it, I probably would have not done it in the first place. The other thing is to just, like, read as much as you can, read in the genre and also read outside the genre. I find a lot of times I get inspiration from things that are not thrillers, um, and, like, also just get out and, like, consume other things, like people and, like, other forms of media. Bits of inspiration can come from the most, like, obscene or, like, boring places, you know? So, I think sometimes, like, the best writing I do is, like, after I take a long walk or get a long shower where I'm just like thinking about other things and the inspiration will hit then. So just consume a lot and also keep trying is basically,
Yeah.
one of the things.
Manifestation.
Yeah, for real.
It's a little nicer than delusion, but delusion works too.
I just like people, I don't know, maybe this is gonna be like really saying I'm like Gen Z, but they say Delulu is the Salulu these days, you gotta be
Yeah.
delusional to be the solution. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think you're onto something, so I'm not gonna knock it.
Yeah.
Tessa from Newport News Public Library says, what is one writing rule you've broken consistently, and did it turn out positively or negatively?
Writing rule. I'm trying to think. I guess like there is kind of, I don't know if it's necessarily a writing rule where like you're kind of encouraged these days as a writer for the first chapter to start out in a certain way. But if you read my book, it kind of does start out in present time, but in the first chapter, she gives a lot of backstory,
Yeah.
which does read a lot like exposition, which generally is not encouraged to do. Like, you should not be, but I'm so guilty of it, where like you're telling a lot of the backstory in the first bit. You're supposed to like lead the reader into it through like other things. But I feel like I think it was for this point of the story where a lot of the only real relationship building you get between the two twins when Chloe's still alive is something that happens in the past, and it wouldn't make sense to set it, it wouldn't make sense to set it like 5 years before and then jump to present day. And it also would not be as compelling to have that moment come in a little bit later, because I feel like you need to know that backstory to understand the dynamic, to understand the choices that Julie later makes.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the story or the writing rules I technically broke, but I think you can break any rule as long as it's done well. And I think the exposition comes off more funny because there's like a voice to it and it doesn't just feel like you're dumping the backstory on. So yeah, I guess that's the rule I broke.
Yeah. Okay. It worked really well. Ronnie Pui from Snow Isle Libraries is saying, what has been the most rewarding part of being a writer?
Oh my gosh. I feel like when I was like just writing, again, it was just my hobby. It's like so freeing to escape into another world. I think I've always been a dreamer and a daydreamer. So finding like the ability to put it into words is so amazing. But now that I'm fully published, there's this crazy like feeling where I'm like, okay, right now someone might be reading my book, like literally right now.
Yeah.
And sometimes I should stay off Goodreads because I should not be looking at reviews. But there's an interesting statistic where you can see how many people are reading your book right now and added it to like their currently reads.
Uh-huh.
And the fact that it's like over 1,000 right now, like 1,000 individual people are consuming what came out of this silly brain, like is crazy to me. And that's so, so special to me that someone's like taking the time out of their day to like digest my thoughts and my words. Like, it's so foreign and so amazing.
You had 1,200 ratings on Goodreads before your book even published. That's amazing.
I know. I was like, so it was kind of crazy because when publication came, I was like, I kind of know what people thought already, which was an interesting feeling because it kind of flattens the excitement of, oh, it's the pub day, but at the same time, you're less anxious about it because you kind of already know. Yeah.
General consensus. And then, but then it just blew up. Now everybody's reading it. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So the question that I always love to close with, I ask everyone, and Cheryl from Harris County Public Library has beat me to it. What are you currently reading that everyone should run out to the library and check out immediately?
Oh my gosh. I'm currently reading Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. I think that's what it's called. It's about, because I'm also currently working on a book about a podcaster, but it's also a thriller. So
Sneak
that
peek.
one is, yeah, that was really good. And I recently finished Tilt by Emma Patty. It's about, an earthquake happening around this Pacific Northwest region, which is where I'm currently at. So it's kind of unreal reading about an earthquake and then being in the place, but
Yeah.
it was really good too. Yeah.
Okay. So are we going to see this book about the podcaster out in a few months since you are writing so quickly?
I mean, the first draft I did submit, but with publishing, things take forever. So I think it's not until next year at the soonest, I think. Yeah.
That's amazing. So that is definitely happening then. It's not just like in draft mode right now.
They accepted it, so hopefully that means yes. Who knows? They might tell me to like axe half the plot and change everything, but for now, it seems like it's gonna be the next book. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's truly been a pleasure to talk to you for the last hour. It was even more of a pleasure to read your book. I laughed so much. Not that I didn't laugh a lot here too, but I don't want to keep your mother waiting any longer for dinner. So
I told her, I was like, I'm busy till 5, and she's still banging on my door. So yeah, that's my Asian mother for you. Get the meal across. Yeah.
I also want to extend a huge thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in to the Author Talk today. Without your support, none of this would be possible, and we thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. If you scroll below the live stream video, you can see the resources area, which contains a link to Liann's book, Julie Chan is Dead. We look forward to everyone joining us next week on May 21st when we have author Rochelle Bergstein with us to chat about her book, The Genius of Judy, How Judy Blume Rewrote Childhood for All of Us. Be sure to register for this and lots of other great events on your library's event page. I'm Brandon Adler, and thank you for joining us. Thank you, Liann.
Thank you.